If you're a parent and you want your children to be financially literate, you might be thinking, gosh, I don't have a lot of money to give to my children. How am I going to set them up for life? Well, I want to let you know you don't need to be rich. You don't even need to leave your kids any amount of money to set them up financially successfully. Hey everybody, my name is Shang. I run the company Save My Cents, where I teach everyday Americans how to save and invest for retirement. Both my husband and I reached the ability to no longer have to save for our retirement by the time that I was age 31 and he is age 36. And a lot of that came from the fact that we saw our parents model fantastic, positive financial behavior for the two of us. My husband came from a working class family that at one point didn't have two dimes to rub together. As for myself, my parents are considered wealthy today, but for much of my early life, all the way up to when my dad was around 40 years old, my parents were not really able to have any money to save and invest. And so between the two of our families, we had to really experience a lot of frugality early on in our lives because that was what our parents could do. They didn't have extra money set aside for anything. A key point to remember that money isn't the only kind of legacy that you can leave behind for your children. Is look at children today from wealthy families. There's a lot of children who don't get that personal connection from their celebrity or their high earning parents. And then so, yes, they have a lot of money, but they weren't taught directly by their parents to save it, invest it, put it to use, buy assets. And what do they end up doing? To fill the hole in their lives by not being around their parents, they go on and spend all this money, spend it on material things, material experiences, and have an empty life at the end. In fact, you can leave your children with really great financial habits, living the life that you would want them to also live when they are an adult. What might this look like? In my family, so my parents really focused on building good habits, being frugal, negotiating as many bills as they can, staying out of debt. I remember my parents had a kind of rudimentary budget. It was a notebook that they kept track of on the kitchen table. One column was, I think, the date, then I think was like the item, then I remember it was a balance of some sort. And I think what happened was my dad had the bank balance on one side, and every time that he or my mom spent on something, they would subtract that number from the balance. I always heard my dad, and this is before, cell phones. He would constantly call the phone company, the cable company, to negotiate down the rates they were charging him, because he would often get in on these promotional rates. And then once like the promotional period of a year expired, he would call them and say, hey, I'd like to get your new promotional rate, or I'm going to switch to the other provider in town. It was very effective. And I saw him. As for my husband, his parents also really had to make do, and his mom managed most of the money in the household. So he watched his mom coupon clip, shop at thrift stores, use the modern version of buy nothing groups, where basically people who don't need an item in their house, they'll offer it up to others around them. So back then, there were community versions of that. And so through both of our lived experiences, both my husband and I grew up believing you can't spend more than you earn, try to stay out of debt, and if you can, invest the money. So by the time that my husband and I met and got married, and we did talk about finances because this is so important to us, we had known by the time that we got married what each other would make and the potential of that income over time in our careers. We knew about each other's net worth. So I didn't have any student loan debt, but my husband did. So we knew going in that we would have a plan after marriage to tackle and pay off that student loans. And we also had a very, pointed discussion, and this was over a series of talks on how we wanted our finances to be managed once we got married and what those goals may be. Our parents did more to teach us by doing exactly what we are now doing, which is being frugal, being mindful of our money, being mindful of our personal finances. I had the added privilege of my dad also teaching me about compound interest, about what it means to invest. And I also, out of curiosity, went on and learned about it on my own in college, after college. My husband did not, and he just learned it on his own. This is why personal finance education really matters. I would love to see more personal finance education spread throughout the country. But if not, and you're a parent and you want your children to benefit from that, just model it. Go ahead and do it. And you know what? Don't worry about being perfect. Nobody is. But the more that you try, the more your kids will learn and see and do.